Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle of Horror interview segment, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre world. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels and the new book, The Spawn of Loki, a Norse fantasy in the world of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Today's guest is F. Paul Wilson. He's the creator of the new book, PANACEA, about two secret societies vying for control of the ultimate medical miracle. F. Paul Wilson is the New York Times best-selling author of horror, adventure, medical thrillers, science fiction, virtually everything in between. His books include the RAPAIRMAN Jack novels, including Ground Zero, The Tomb, Fatal Error, The Adversary Cycle, including The Keep, which, by the way, I know from the Scott Glenn movie, which I'm sure we may discuss, and a young adult series featuring a teenage Jack. Wilson has won the Prometheus Award, the Bram Stoker Award, the Inkpot Award from San Diego Comic-Con, and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Horror Writers of America, among other honors. That's incredible. He lives in Wall, New Jersey. To learn more about F. Paul Wilson and his work, visit RAPAIRMANJack.com. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, Jason. Boy, all those awards. I must be really good.
That's what I hear. That actually, but the funny thing is, the great thing about awards is that look, somebody looks at a book cover, right? They choose a book. You've published many books. You running along, you choose a book and you pick it up, and what are you going to choose the book by? You can judge it by its cover, which people do, but also it's going to say things like New York Times best-selling author, something that I'm sure that your parents were probably thrilled to see attached to your name.
Well, so was I. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. That's like making it's making the All Stars. It's and then all of these. That's a hell of a lot of awards. God, we were talking about the Keep.
But I'm old and I've been doing it a long time, so it's.
I mean, before I ask you about PANACEA, because I totally want to ask you about PANACEA, but we were talking about The Keep, which I remember distinctly you being interviewed in, I believe it was Twilight Zone magazine. I want to say this is like 1983, and you were talking about how that was a book about the historic Dracula. If I understand correctly, the historic Dracula facing off against Nazis. And is that right? Am I remembering that book correctly?
No. No, the whole Dracula vampire thing was a red herring I set up in the book. The conceit was I started off with the idea that I had read Hotel Transylvania by Quinn Yarborough, and
sure.
And I thought the idea of an ethical vampire was ridiculous, and because they're parasites. And so I said, but wouldn't it be interesting that you have something evil that's pretending to be a vampire, because what it really is so much worse.
Yeah. And
from there, the book grew. So that was the genesis of The Keep. So the whole vampire thing is something that the evil entity is fostering, because he's so much worse.
But you weren't pleased with the movie adaptation.
Oh no.
That's it.
No, I've bitched about that for a zillion years. I recently
we won't get into it. I promise I won't make you talk about that again. But it is an interesting. We can take it from this perspective. That's an interesting club to be a part of, though. The writers who have had books made into movies, but are unhappy with, like the author of V.I. Warshawski, deeply, deeply unhappy, I'm sure.
Well, it's just that he went and made something else.
Yeah.
And if you want to make something else, fine. But don't do it with my book. When you're hired to adapt my book, adapt my book. And
do you think the main problem is that then, of course, it changes or it alters people's expectations when they come back to read the actual novel? Because of course you can get The Keep today. It's not like you can't get your hands on it.
Well, it was actually like. It turned out not a bad thing for sales, because we did a tie-in version,
mm-hmm.
and we sold about 250,000 copies of the tie-in, because people came out of that movie not knowing what the hell was going on. And
right.
So they saw, based on a novel by so-and-so, and they said, well, they saw the movie Tying the Dish. He said, yeah, that was, there was something going on there. I have no idea what it was, but let me go see if I can figure it out. And so we sold a lot of copies of the book, but not because the movie was a success. The movie was a tremendous failure. It lost a ton of money for Paramount, and Michael Mann doesn't even mention it anymore. That he.
It's so funny how these things happen. How when you think about it, something that has the difference between books and movies, and you can paint this very positively or you can paint it negatively, but a movie that is a disappointment can still drive tremendous sales for a book.
Well, more people are going to see a flop movie,
right,
than will ever see your book.
Right. Right.
So I mean, in that sense, it's worth it. It's worth it. They pay you a bunch of money for the rights, and it's just that when it's a flop and nobody wants to see your next book as far as a movie adaptation because that thing lost its shirt. So it's
that can be a challenge. Yeah, I can totally see that. All right, so the new book, which came out just a few weeks ago, actually, literally about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, and the at the heart of the plot in Panacea is that there is out there apparently a cure for all diseases. There's a substance that is being produced and guarded by people who know its secrets, and there are several groups at work in this book who are trying to grapple with the question of what if there were a cure-all for everything? Cures cancer, cures radiation poisoning, cures heart disease, cures arthritis. There's this, what if there were this cure, and would it make sense to allow it out, or would it need to be kept secret? And all the different people who get involved in that. So what brought you to this question? I mean, that's a really novel question. And by the way, what would happen to the world if a cure-all existed?
Oh, it would be chaos. I mean, right, 1/5 or 1/6 of our economy right now is devoted to healthcare.
Right.
So can you imagine the number of people you're talking millions and millions and millions. You're talking tens of millions of people out of work. Bang, like that.
Right.
And all their skills are no use anymore. And not only that, but you have people who aren't dying from what they would have died from. And so they're living on, and they're also using up resources. And, I mean, also there would be new religions springing up around the Panacea. I mean, it would be total social chaos. We might recover, but it would take a long time, and there would be a lot, there'd be a lot of nasty, dirty, fatal fallout from it. So
I can just imagine. Boy, there's so many different ways to take that question. I mean, for instance, let's say it exists, but it's not yet widespread. There's this thing, but right now the way we limit access to certain medicines, and this is by necessity or just by choice, is we make them tremendously expensive, right? So some people can get access to.
Well, it also costs. Don't forget. I mean, the way we're set up with all the testing that has to go on to make sure they're safe, it actually costs billions, and that's with a B. Yeah. And that's not an exaggeration. It costs billions of dollars to bring a drug to market. So
no doubt.
Those companies want to get their money back. And
but that means that if you've got hypothyroidism, just to pick something random, some people can afford to get the medicine. Some people can't afford it. Some people can treat that.
But let's face it, thyroid, T4, levothyroxine is so cheap. I mean, you can get a 90-day supply for $10.
Maybe that's a terrible example. Anyway, what I'm saying is one thing that could happen with a drug like this is at first it could be held secret. Only certain groups would be able to have access to it. Like your characters raise the issue. Nelson in the CIA raises the issue. What if North Korea got a hold of this and then poisoned everybody else and then kept the cure for themselves?
It can be weaponized in a negative way, in the sense that you can come up with an airborne, avian flu.
Yeah.
And you can use the panacea to protect certain populations, and then you can withhold it to make sure that other populations are wiped out. So in that sense, you can weaponize a good thing. And I was a little scared of myself when I came up with it, because I was like, this is kind of sick. And hey, you thought of it. So,
you thought of how exactly you would wipe out most of humanity, except for the ones that you wanted.
The people I like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is that's going to be true of everybody. That's going to be true even of those who consider themselves good guys. No matter what country you're in, you might go, well, we should keep this for ourselves and not for others. So in this book, you've also got a group who are religious. So their problem with it is philosophical. They don't really care about the disruption to the economy that would come around. Their problem is would you like to describe exactly what is this religious order that's against the panacea, that wants to keep it a secret?
They're a fundamentalist Christian organization that has a very warped view. They are an offshoot of the Benedictine monks from the 6th century, and they view that it's humanity's lot to suffer. That's what God, because they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that's what you have to do. And they view the panacea as undermining God's dictum that you must suffer, be sick and die, and so
have you ever heard such a philosophy in real life? Has anybody ever said?
I've never heard of this. This is something I invented.
So there's nobody out there who's going, hey, we shouldn't have, I don't know, we shouldn't have childbirth drugs. We shouldn't have painkillers because people need to. Actually, the childbirth one, since there's specifically the gospel, the line of, not gospel, there's the Genesis line about childbirth being a burden. You would think
born in blood and pain.
Yeah. So you'd think that there would be people who would say that therefore pain medication would not be appropriate. But this is just me imagining. I've never actually encountered anybody who would actually dare to say such a thing in polite company.
Well, there are people who don't believe in anesthesia for childbirth. I mean, they think that.
Oh no, sure, natural childbirth, absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
I don't know how rational that is, but it's.
I've known people, and I will not name names, but I have known people who did it twice, and also now, if you ask them, will say, I don't know what the hell I was thinking. That they've since gone, that was dumb. It's not like I don't cap my teeth. It's not like I don't, so. I've heard people go, I don't know. So
I've assisted on many births, and I've had women, when they get that epidural, they look at the anesthesiologist and say, "Oh, bless you, I want to marry you."
But Paul, you know what's so weird about the epidural? Actually, I got to say, this is something I did not know. I know we're going far afield. I promise to come back to Panacea for a second. But you know what? I did not know. My wife did not know, actually, when one of our children was being born, that you could turn the epidural off. That you could stop the flow and feeling would come back. And then, believe it or not, communication is so poor that nobody had ever said, you can choose it and you can also turn it off. That was just fascinating to me. That not the fact itself, but the fact that such a basic piece of information had completely never come up. Go figure.
Well, most people are very happy, to keep it flowing.
Sure. Well, it just depends.
Once they get that relief, it's just like,
Yeah. Oh, sure. Why would you be assisting in births? Are you?
Oh no, I'm a family physician in my spare time.
Oh, I didn't know that. I really didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, well, that's fascinating. Is that why your character is a medical examiner? She's throwing around, lots of jargon left and right, which is very familiar to us as readers now, because this is a common trope, is to have a main character as a medical examiner. But anyway, to be able to do that stuff, like if I were to do it, I have to go do a lot of research. But that means that some of this is just your vocabulary of your life.
Yeah.
Well, that's fabulous. So if you're a doctor by trade, when did you start writing novels? Were you writing novels after you were already practicing, or during medical school, or how did that work?
I sold my first short stories in medical school to John Campbell at Analog.
Right,
and,
that's right.
And my first year out of into practice, I was in a group practice, so I could actually have a human life, with only be on call like one day a week and one weekend out of 5 or 6 or something like that. So I mean, actually, and so I was able to start writing, and I took one of my novelettes and did an outline of how I wanted to carry it on, and sent it to Doubleday, and they bought it.
Yes.
And it did come into them with the pedigree of having already been sold to Campbell, who was like the father of modern science fiction. So
sure,
I had that benefit going for me, but it was the first publisher I had sent it to, and they bought it. So it was, and they offered me a whopping $2,000. So I always knew I could never make a living at writing, but then as time went on, I started earning more from writing than I was from medicine. So I cut back, and so I've been part-time for 20-some-odd years now.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. So you still do your continuing ed, you still keep up your license?
Yeah, in order to keep my license, I have to do 50 credits a year.
Yeah. Actually,
if someone would pay me just to go to these courses, I would just do that, because I love the learning, and
sure.
I love learning all the new stuff. It's just fascinating what's going on in medicine, and even though I'm in the middle of it, I'm still agog at what we can do compared to what we could do when I got into practice.
So this must be a particular. It's funny because this notion of the panacea, of a cure-all, that's kind of a shadow of what you might have observed over the past couple decades, where people don't die of things that they used to die of, necessarily.
Well, a lot of it comes out of. I mean, healing has been a big part of my fiction. There was my first novel was called Healer.
Mm-hmm.
That was straight science fiction back in '76, actually 40 years ago this year. And there was The Touch, and there was my novel that no one has ever read, probably, or very few people have read, called The Fifth Harmonic, which is also about healing. So I mean, it's a continuing thing, because as a doctor, there's so many times you run up against things that you can't help. That this person's a goner, and you wish that there was some way you could turn it around, and so often there's not. Especially I'm seeing. You see a lot of Alzheimer's. There's just not much you can do for those folks, and the family suffers terribly from that type of thing. So you wish there was a way you could, there was a way to reverse it, but unfortunately there isn't. And
they suffer, and they suffer mentally as well as financially. I mean, that's
the thing is, the patient doesn't suffer. It's the family. The family goes through hell, and the patient is blithely unaware of all the the agony they're causing. But you can't blame them, because they're just they have no real awareness of their surroundings.
Wow. I was thinking about. I was
that's
watching.
A pleasant subject, huh?
Well, no, I mean it's important to what I mean. You've taken a lot of these concepts and turned them into a thriller, but this is stuff that we're grappling with, and I was thinking oddly enough about AIDS. I was watching some movie from the mid '80s, and Merritt Buttrick, who's one of many actors who died of AIDS, was on, and I was thinking, it's just so strange that there was like 15 or so years there where well-known actors, well-known, sports figures, sports writers, just all of a sudden would just take sick and die, and there was nothing we could do about that. It was very novel for the latter half of the 20th century. At least to a layperson. To me, like just standing around watching the country go by, that was an unusual moment.
And it's also when you think about AIDS, if there's ever an illness or a virus that's tailor-made for a conspiracy theory, it's AIDS, because here's a virus that attacks the immune system. Whatever you're going to use whatever you use to fight off an infection, the infection disables that, and so you're screwed. And it's I can see how easily and justifiably conspiracy theories could jump up around something like that, because it's just too perfect an illness.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, and I'm going to shift over to asking you about your process. But your books are connected, aren't they? Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's right, and they're connected by this.
29 or 30 of them are connected. Yeah.
29 or 30, and of this world of involving secret societies and conspiracies. Like, just very basically, how does PANACEA fit into that world of conspiracy?
Well, I did an article for, I forget who I did it for. I guess it was Criminal Element, that is an online magazine, about intrusive cosmic entities. And, I've been definitely influenced by, Lovecraft.
Sure.
Not his writing style so much, but the way he brought a wholly different, a unique materialistic approach to horror fiction, where, it was dragons and it was chain-rattling ghosts and all that stuff was the dark fiction of the past. But and vampires afraid of the cross and all that stuff. He didn't even throw it out. He didn't even bother addressing it. He had his own cosmos, and it was mechanistic, and it was, the best you could hope from it was indifference, but most of the times it was, inimical. And so, that I encountered that as a teenager, and being raised a Catholic, with the good guy up above and the bad guy down below, and everything's fine because we have a balance, And all of a sudden I'm hit with this thing, and it made, strangely enough, it made sense to me. And I said, this is, holy crap. This is a whole new way of looking at existence, and I'm not a fan of his gods and all that, and they've been trivialized, with Cthulhu plush slippers and stuff. But it's had the so-called cosmic horror has had a great effect on me, and so this book fits into that in a way, but in a much gentler way. It's much more of like it's more Fordian than Lovecraftian. And
when you say Fordian, you're thinking of the Fordian Times, right?
Charles Ford.
Charles Ford.
His books, Low and the Book of the Damned and stuff, where he just cataloged all these strange things. And his thesis was that we are property, and forces are playing with us. And that, in a way, is what made this book work for me. I started it with the idea of breaking away from the intrusive cosmic entities of my secret history, and that I would just, go off on a different tack. And I found that I was having trouble making it work for me in the context of the novel, because it's got to work for me, and if it doesn't work for me, I can't sell it to you.
Sure.
And at that time, I was watching the first True Detective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's his name? Cole was sitting there saying, some time is a flat circle,
right?
Which I thought, okay, that's total bullshit. But
whatever, Cole. Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't it be interesting if I could get my character Rick, who's the male lead, to espouse some crazy philosophy that would somehow make sense of the panacea, because the panacea is utterly impossible. It breaks the laws of physics, and it breaks the laws of biology. I mean, you can't have something that cures radiation poisoning cure a MRSA infection or cure multiple sclerosis. It just can't happen.
Right.
So,
as the doctors point out in the book, the first doctor.
Right. And so I'm trying to make this work for me, because I'm saying I'm having a hard time here. Yeah. And so Rick started spouting. I'm awake usually I'm awake at ungodly hours of the morning, and at 3 a.m, I'm thinking about this, and he starts talking to. I'm trying to work out a little dialogue in my head, and he starts talking to Laura about these intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, which is a quote from H.G. Wells, and that they're toying with us, and that the panacea really comes from outside, because it can't exist here. It doesn't make any sense here. So they're toying with us, and they're throwing it at us, because we can understand that this is impossible, and it's going to throw everything into a tizzy. And how are we going to deal with it? It's like, someone working with a beehive and says, what happens if I pull out the queen? That type. Right. And so that's the kind of stuff they're pulling on us. And this is his.
In other words, this thing is so impossible that it has to have been engineered. So who is the one engineering it?
Somewhere else. Yeah. And all of a sudden the book started working for me, and it started writing itself. And wonderful. I was absolutely delighted. I said, okay, this makes everything work for me. And now, and the book just took off, and it was just it's one of those things that just makes writing so much fun when something like that happens. It's just this is great. So
that's wonderful. By the way, somehow that just suddenly reminded me of one of the proofs of God, which I think John Cleese boiled down to, "Oh God, you are so very, very big, therefore you exist." The whole idea, this is so complicated that surely it is deliberate. And I'm trying to remember who he was boiling down, actually. But I love your use of Catholicism, by the way. I think it's really cool. I like the crazy zealot who dresses down the girl doing her rosary, and she thinks that he's going to be nice to her because she's doing the rosary, and then he starts quizzing her on where she stands on different things, and then he just sort of calls her
right, he's a zealot.
Apostate.
And, I mean, it's... I was raised a Catholic, so I know all that stuff. I'm a devout agnostic, but I know where all that stuff's coming from, and I know some people who think like that.
Sure.
That if and in a way it's true. I mean, I got it sort of from. It was very funny. Penn Teller, Penn Jillette took. Who was that British guy that used to be on had a talk show on MSNBC?
I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, I'm a Catholic, but I don't buy into the birth control thing." Right. And Penn, who's a devout atheist, said, "You can't do that." He said, "You're not a Catholic then." He said, "You're a Lutheran or you're a Presbyterian, but you're not a Catholic. Catholics, when the Pope is speaking ex cathedra and he says this is the way it is, you have to accept that, or you're not a Catholic. And so I said, oh, that's so true. And these people who think they can, it's a Chinese menu. I said, I want to have a character who's going to, really rip somebody a new one for talking like that. And so although it is, I think it's wonderful, and I think it works really well. I mean, in truth, I'm neither Catholic nor I'm none of those things. But it strikes me that the funny thing is, it also reveals that he lacks a certain amount of human. What would be the word? He lacks a certain amount of human creativity, because we're able to rationalize all kinds of things, and still, that the ability to I don't know exactly how to map this, but the ability to rationalize things away is actually a distinctly human thing. Oh, absolutely.
I wouldn't even call it a failing. It's a thing we do. It's our camouflage. It's what keeps us safe in mind. It's known as the vital lie too. That this is what gets you through the day. Yes.
And it's so integral to many people's emotional and intellectual survival.
Yeah.
That to be able to lie to yourself that way, it's and as you say, it's a very human thing, and obviously only a sentient, sapient creature or species could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so last thing I want to ask you about before we go is about your process. So you've been writing for a while. So when you know that you've got a book that you're working on now and you want to finish it, do you set yourself a deadline? You try to knock out a certain number of words a week, or how do you accomplish getting your book done?
Well, I have what I call the vomit draft, and that is I sit down and I would do a minimum of 2,000 words a day. If I'm rolling, I'll go farther.
That is good, though. I mean, that's pretty solid.
And it's it works for me because I don't look back. I don't tweak while I'm writing. It's because that gets in the way of the narrative momentum. So I just blast through it. I don't have a good idea who my characters are when I start. I have a very good idea who they are when I end. And so then I go back and I start backfilling, and I start filling in the nuances and all the things I've learned about the characters, and I make them real. So I don't believe in having a very firm character sketch when I start. I like to leave lots of space. And
do you follow an outline?
I used to have lots of outlines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to do some pretty. When I started out, I was working full time as a physician, and I was really putting out about a novel a year. And the idea of having to throw away something was really scary.
Yeah.
So I once sat next to Rick McCammon at a convention. We were on a panel together. I said, "Well, what are you working on?" He said, "Well, I was working on a novel, and it just wasn't going the way I wanted to go, So I threw it out. I'm starting again. I said, "Well, how far along did you get?" He said, "I got about 300 pages into it." I said, "What? 300 pages? Oh my God!"
Yeah.
For a part-time writer, that's oh my God, that was like 4 months work for me. So that type of thing is a nightmare for me. So I used to always do some very detailed outlines, so I knew exactly where I was going, and I could write the book. I could do 3 pages a day and knock them out. and know exactly where I was going. But as I got better and as I got older, and as I got more time when I went part-time on medicine, I started just doing story beats where, I always know how the story's going to end. I think you owe your reader a good ending. You owe them catharsis. If you're building up a lot of tension in the novel for 80,000 words, you owe them a catharsis on that last 20,000. And if you don't give it to them, you're cheating them. And a lot of times they're going to come away feeling cheated. And some authors get away with it. And I'm not going to name names, but there's some famous names that I've been very disappointed with because they haven't delivered on the promise. They promised me Ragnarok, and they gave me a bar fight. So
I won't name too many names, but I can think of well, you know what? I'm not even going to name titles, but I can absolutely think of books where the concept is so brilliant, and then the payoff, is completely lost. Like the author himself just decided, I don't know what the hell,
Because he
you're
didn't
right.
know how it was going to end when he started.
It's like, you're right. It was a brilliant idea. There's somehow they've uncovered a 747 at the bottom of a cave. You know what? I don't know how it's there either. I got to turn this thing in, so we're just going to go with hypnotism.
Well, I'll figure it out when I get there, and a lot of times they don't.
I love that.
There's a little hubris going on there,
But there are some authors who are so good at what they do. You think of like this collection of different things that you're looking for in a book. There are some authors who literally, I enjoy their writing, I don't like the endings, so I just sort of look forward to being disappointed by their new book every year.
Well, Lansdale tells me that he doesn't know where his book's going, and I have to believe him because he's been pretty consistent telling me that. But he's able to do it. But there's a lot of writers who can't do that. He says, I just start over the couple of characters in the situation, and I just sort of see where they roll. And
right.
And for him it works. But for those other writers where I can tell, I said, "Oh, you didn't know where this was going, did you?" Now,
well, especially when you don't have the time to go back and remove big sections, and sometimes you can still see a book is like practically perfect, but you can tell at least one thread. You go, I have a feeling that this is a part of some larger plot that has been cut somewhere along the way, and it just, especially when you're reading pulps. If I pick up a pulp from the mid-'70s, something somebody just wrote to be like an airport thriller. There will be characters who are introduced and they have kind of a plot, and then somehow by the 250 pages or so, that character is gone. We've never seen them again. Whatever the hell they were working on early, it
may not have been necessarily cut, but it may have been that they thought they had a place for them in the book, and then they wound up. Well, wait a minute. I don't know what to do with this guy, and
I can't afford to lose 30 pages, so
I need the word count. So.
Absolutely. Well, gosh. Okay, one last thing. I ask everybody this. Where do you write? Do you write at home, or do you go out to a coffee shop and harass people there?
Oh, I don't. I'm a people watcher. I cannot go to a coffee shop.
Yeah.
I just, I love airports for that. I just sit there and stare at people, and it says, all the things you had in your closet, and that's what you wore today.
Right.
I can't write in a coffee shop. So I have I have a study. I have a loft in my condo, and that's where I do all my writing. But I do great writing also on airplanes because I don't tap into the internet. There's no telephone ringing. I write like crazy on airplanes. I love them, but at home it's strictly in my office. I have an old roll top desk. I got my computer, my desktop computer, and I just sit there, and it's just, it's like. But one thing I do have to do, I found lately, is that I have to shut off the internet. I have to have a program called Freedom.
Yes.
And
thank you for recommending that. I know that a lot of our listeners will find that really useful. Freedom. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a really handy app that it locks you out of the internet for as long as you want. So I set it for 45 minutes, and I just can't. Even if I want to go look something up, I can't.
Right.
So it's really improved my productivity amazingly.
Oh, that's really inspiring. I mean, I've got Freedom. I haven't used it in a long time, but I think I'm gonna make sure and use it more. Boy, you're right. That's a fabulous program. All right. So the new book is PANACEA. It just came out exactly 2 weeks ago. The author from Tor Books. The author is the New York Times best-selling author F. Paul Wilson. It's been really, really fun to talk to you. I hope that people read the book and love it, and I hope we get a chance to talk again sometime. Have a fantastic, fantastic evening.
You too. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.